Kristie Morgan. I'm a registered migration agent in Australia. We're getting lots of inquiries at the moment from people who are looking to start their migration plans this year. And for people who have got skills and qualifications, there's a couple of different options, and that's something that we wanted to have a chat about today. So for most people, they'd be looking at either general skilled migration or employer sponsorship. Two fantastic options, but very different. So we just wanted to talk about a few of the things that you need to consider, because it doesn't just come down to cost, and a lot of clients tend to make their decision based on cost alone, and this is a bit of a trap. So these are some of the issues that we want you to have a think about, because they do impact on your migration strategy. Okay, firstly we'll talk about the benefits of employer sponsorship. Great program. If you have an offer of sponsorship, it is a very fast and effective way to get to Australia. It's also a very cost-effective way to get to Australia. So we can understand why a lot of people are targeting employer sponsorship as the way that they will come and migrate to Australia, but there's a few things that you need to consider. Typically, people want to come to Australia via employer sponsorship because of the lower IELTS scores. So for a 457 visa, for example, you only need to secure a score of 5 in each band. There's a lower application fee. So primary applicants pay only $1,035 to apply for a 457 visa, so it's a cheap pathway. And you don't need to evidence financial ability to look after yourself once you get here. So that is a very, very big factor that people consider when looking at their migration plans, and it's one thing that employer sponsorship definitely has in its favour. One thing that you do need to consider if you're offshore looking for employer sponsorship is how hard is the process going to be to actually get an offer of employment. When you're offshore, it's more difficult. Employers can't see you in person, they can't chat to you in person. We do have Skype obviously, and there is ways around that, but it is an obstacle, and unless you can come to Australia easily to meet an employer, it is going to be something that you need to factor into your decision. A lot of people that are looking for employer sponsorship want me to help them with the process of finding a sponsor for either a subclass 186 ENS or subclass 187 RSMS employer sponsored visa. Fantastic in that it's got permanent residency, that's what they're all looking for. The problem with this is if you are offshore at the moment, the processing time on getting a permanent employer-sponsored visa application through is up to 5-6 months. Employers are not going to wait that long, unfortunately, so you could be really jeopardising your migration plans by insisting that an employer sponsor you on a permanent option. If you're offshore, you need to be looking at the temporary 457 option. It's the only way an employer is really going to take that time to help you get over here. Processing time on a 457 visa is currently only about 6 weeks, so employers are quite happy to be reasonable. I mean, you're coming from overseas, so you've got a lot of things to organise. They're generally okay with waiting that period of time, but certainly they're not going to wait 5 or 6 months for you, so just consider that in your migration strategy. You either need to accept that you're probably going to have to come on the 457 option and then wait till you get here to put in for your permanent residency application, your PR. Otherwise, you need to be looking at GSM. If you want to come on a permanent visa from the outset, GSM is the way to go. The other thing I'd like you to consider if looking at an employer-sponsored pathway is that finding sponsorship can be very hard. We have a lot of clients who religiously put in a great deal of effort daily to try and apply for positions, contact companies and sort of network to try and find those opportunities. It is difficult, so it's not impossible. There are a lot of clients that actually do get those opportunities and are able to come over in a relatively short period of time, but for a lot it can be a very time-consuming and frustrating process. So it's something that you need to be very committed to. You need to accept that it could take you quite some time to get here, and you need to be aware that this is definitely a downside to the employer-sponsored pathway. If you've already got an offer of sponsorship, fantastic, that it's quite fast and we can get you here easily, but looking for sponsorship can be very frustrating, and for many people they give up. So we want you to know this before you set out down that pathway, because you need to be prepared for the fact that you need to be in for the long haul, and it is going to take quite a deal of commitment and time. There are ways that we certainly do support our clients to be able to try and find sponsorship in Australia. Having an agent is definitely an advantage. We can give you support in the way of being able to talk to employers and things like that, but actively you need to be applying for positions every day, looking for opportunities, and it is something that's going to take a great deal of your personal commitment. That you need to consider is the fact that when you come to Australia on an employer-sponsored visa, you're tied to that sponsoring employer. So you can change positions once you get here, but you would need to do another application, and that costs time and takes time and costs money. So there are things that you need to be aware of, that you are required to work for your sponsoring employer. This is a condition on your visa, so if you go and work for another employer whilst on a 457 and you don't do the required paperwork, you would be in breach of your visa conditions. So it is something that is very important, and you need to be aware of the fact that you need to be committed to working with that particular employer. Another thing that you need to think about with employer sponsorship is you do need to hold working visa insurance. So this covers all your medical, or partly covers medical expenses whilst you're in Australia on a temporary visa, because during this time, for most clients, they can't access our Medicare system. So that's another cost that you need to think about if you're looking at applying under an employer-sponsored strategy. Okay, GSM. I light up a little bit when I talk about it because I love it. Yes, it is more costly to go down the pathway of a general skilled migration strategy. Generally, this is because it leads to permanent residency, so there's a much better chance that you're going to end up with a permanent visa in a much shorter time frame if you look at general skilled migration. The question you need to ask yourself is, okay, it's going to cost me a little bit more money to come to Australia initially via GSM. What is it worth to your family to have that peace of mind that you have permanent residency from the day you step in Australia? That is what I want you to think about. Coming to Australia on a temporary visa brings with it a lot of uncertainty. Most clients on these temporary visas are nervous that they're not going to be able to stay, that something might go wrong with their employment. They live daily sometimes in fear that they're not going to get to stay in Australia. Once they get here, they want to stay. So think about the options that come with this general skilled migration pathway. If you come on a subclass 190 visa, which is the permanent state-sponsored option, you have got permanent residency right from day dot. If you come on a subclass 489 visa, which is the temporary option, you've got a very defined pathway to hit residency in 2 years' time. So for a lot of clients, that peace of mind is worth so much more than a few extra $1,000 at the beginning of their migration process. And that's what I want you to think about, because when it comes down to it, when you're in another country, you need to feel secure and you've got peace of mind that you know what's going to happen to you in the next few years, and that's something that isn't always the case on employer sponsorship. So just think really carefully about it. General skilled migration can give you that peace of mind to know that this is what's going to happen to me in 12 months or 2 years down the track, and it gives you some security, I guess, that you know what's going to happen and that things are all good. One major factor that you need to think about is your ability to get a job. Now, with GSM, if you've got full work rights, it's going to be much easier to secure employment in Australia. You're going to be just like every other Aussie in this country if you've got that piece of paper that says you have full work rights. So this is something that is worth so much more than a couple of extra $1,000 when first taking those steps to start your migration plans. When you've got your GSM visa and you've got that ability to work for any employer, I cannot tell you how much stress that takes off our clients. So think about that. Think about the fact that you will be like me, just any other Aussie. I can go and work for any employer who would like me to work for them. So these are the kinds of things that you need to think about as part of your migration strategy. They're very important, and they're going to impact on how you feel once you get here and the opportunities that you're going to have once you get here. One thing that you also need to think about is on GSM you can move between employers. So if you get over here and suddenly get a much better opportunity for work, you might be able to earn an extra $10,000 or $20,000 a year simply by changing employers. That opportunity itself is worth so much. So tying yourself to employer sponsorship can actually hold you back and could cost you financially thousands and thousands of dollars. Think about that in your strategy. You need to be able to come over here and take advantage of what Australia has to offer. We do have lots of great opportunities. You may be able to pick up more money by going and changing employers down the track. So these are the kinds of things that clients don't always think about at the start of their process, but are really important. So even one job change with a pay rise of $10,000 can almost pay for your entire migration strategy. So think very carefully about these things, which may not necessarily come into your initial decision. Okay, so what do I want you to take from this today? I don't want you to think that employer sponsorship is necessarily the easiest and fastest way to get to Australia, because often it's not. Clients who spend a significant amount of time and effort applying for positions on a daily basis, they spend hours and hours communicating with employers, and it can be fruitless and it is very demoralising. So don't just assume that, you know, because the processing time on a employer-sponsored visa is much shorter, that it's going to be a quicker way to get here, because a lot of the legwork that you need to put in prior to that is going to be significant. So cheapest doesn't always mean fastest. So just because it's cheaper to get over here on a 457 visa, or because you don't have to show the financial capacity that you might have to show with a GSM strategy, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the fastest way. And often people who set out with a strategy to find an employer in Australia, they might still be looking a year, 2 years after they start the process, whereas with GSM there is a little bit more control over how long the process is going to take. Sure, it might take you 12 months from when you first set out to get from start to finish, once you've had all of your skills assessments done and you've been down the process of applying for state nomination. So you could actually get here quicker on GSM than by setting out to find sponsorship. So think about that. In 12 months' time, when you've been looking for sponsorship for a year and then you suddenly change your mind and think, okay, I'm going to give GSM a go now, you're 12 months behind. So just think about that really carefully when making a decision as to which pathway to take. There's other things to consider, such as the impact on your family. Coming to Australia as a permanent resident holder, you do get lots of the benefits that us Aussies get every day as well. So things like access to Medicare, subsidised schooling, they're all things that need to come into your decision. So even though it might be cheaper to come here on a 457 visa to start with, when you start factoring all of these things into it, it can be a much more expensive way to get here. Plus, at some point after you get here on employer sponsorship, you then need to take the process of applying for your permanent residency anyway. So again, you're going to come up to significant costs in the future when applying for a permanent visa. It's not straightforward. You don't just come here and it all just happens. You need to think about these future costs that would be applicable under an employer sponsorship strategy. For a lot of people, I get told that the process is just too long for GSM. It can look like that when you start your migration plans. With general skilled migration, there's a lot of little steps that need to be taken, particularly if you're looking at state sponsorship. There's lots of little things that we have to do along the way to get you close to your goal. The trick is you need to start. Not doing anything is not going to get you anywhere. So the clients that actively take that first step, and it might just be getting an initial consultation to talk about your migration strategy. After that half-hour consultation, they've got an email which states exactly what way we think that they should migrate to Australia. They already feel better that they've made a change. So following on from that, they then take little steps. They might get their skills assessment underway straight away because that piece of paper is fundamental to a GSM strategy, but that it's something that they can do immediately. So there's lots of little things that have to happen. Breaking it down into smaller components makes it much more manageable in terms of cost, in terms of the level of stress. They like to be able to do things in little parts. So your migration doesn't need to be scary. It should be a straightforward process if it's handled professionally, by breaking it down into those smaller steps and just taking one step at a time. Learn as much as you can about migration and about the strategy that you're taking so that you fully understand what you're about to do. Clients that have a really good understanding of what their visa is going to let them do and processing times and processes that are going to take place during that period, they're much more equipped and much more able to handle their migration plans. So really get a grip on what you're doing, talk to your agent and understand the process that you're about to undertake. Lastly, just start. The best thing you can do is actually book a consultation and start the process of talking to your agent. It's not as scary as it seems, and I think once people can see that it's just a number of little steps that all lead to the big goal. So hope that helped a little bit, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you all, and hopefully we'll help you get to Australia as soon as we can. Thank you. Hi, I'm Kristie from Morgan Jensen Migration. I'm a registered migration agent in Australia. Morgan Jensen. In terms of which migration strategy they're going to take. So I guess Hi, I'm Kristie Morgan. I'm a registered migration agent in Australia, and we're getting lots of that they've got which I would like to answer, and